Hello, this is Mrs. Ross, and this is Module B, Unit 2, Lesson 4. I don't have the pen to my Wacom tablet, so you're just going to have to hear me today. So can't write the stuff down, so lovely. But first definition is here on page 100. Homeostasis is the process by which the inside of the body maintains stable conditions. The process by which the inside of the body maintains stable conditions. How is homeostasis controlled? Homeostasis is controlled through feedback. And then the definition of feedback is a cycle of events in which information from one step controls or affects the previous step. A cycle of events in which information from one step controls or affects a previous step. When does negative feedback occur? Let's see, negative feedback occurs when the body senses a change in its internal environment and activates processes that will slow or prevent the change. Negative feedback occurs when the body senses a change in its internal environment and activates processes that will slow or prevent the change. When does positive feedback occur? Positive feedback occurs when the body activates processes that increase or reinforce the change. Okay. Then we have our first quick check here. It says, even when it's cold outside, the human body maintains an internal temperature of 37 degrees Celsius. Which term describes the maintenance of stable internal condition? And it's going to be homeostasis. I can't circle it, so. And then we're going to go on to the next page. Sensory receptors. So the definition of sensory receptors, they help an animal gather information about its environment. So basically, they're receptors that help an animal gather information about its environment. Some examples of sensory receptors are the skin, ears, nose, mouth, and eyes. And then the definition of stimulus. So it's a type of environmental message. Stimulus is a type of environmental message. It could be light, heat, or pressure, but it's a type of environmental message. Let's see. Example of stimulus. Let's see. Could be a butterfly landing on your finger. Could be an electrical charge of some kind. How do neurons help the body respond to stimulus? So neurons carry information from sensory receptors to the brain. That's how they help the body respond to stimulus. They carry information from the sensory receptors to the brain, and then they carry information from the brain to various parts of the body to tell them how to respond. So neurons are basically the messengers. So quick check, one of the characteristics of living things is that they respond to external changes in their environment so their internal environment stays as stable as possible. Name an environmental change that an animal must respond to in order to keep a stable internal environment. And we just talked about a environmental change that we have to respond to, and that's cold or heat. So outside temperature, weather, outside temperature. And then it says, explain what might happen to an organism if it did not adapt to an external change. So if we could not keep our temperature, our internal temperature, despite what the external temperature was, it's possible we would have like organ failure because cellular function has to occur at a certain degree. So I know that if we there's a low temperature, if we get below a certain temperature, then it affects your brain. You can have brain damage. And of course, if you get above, you can affect the brain as well. So there's one example. Let's see. How are sensory receptors organized? So let's go down to the next one. Sensory receptors are organized by the kind of stimuli they detect and respond to. Sensory receptors can be organized by the kind of stimuli they detect and respond to. I can't see it. What do mechanical receptors detect? Let's see. Mechanical receptors detect pressure, movement, and tension. Pressure, movement, and tension. And what is an example of a mechanical receptor response? It says a fish has a specialized organ that detects vibrations in the water, helping them navigate or hunt. Other examples include the motion of sound waves, allowing animals to hear. What do chemical receptors detect? They detect chemical signals such as odors or taste. And what do electromagnetic receptors detect? They detect electromagnetic radiation such as light. So here's our next quick check. A rat approaches a piece of rotting fruit, smells it, then takes a bite, then runs away. Which statement best explains the reason for the rat's behavior? And it's going to be the rat's chemical receptors detect chemicals in the fruit that alert the rat to possible danger. So that's the third response there. And then there's a diagram. Is the diagram below? Where did I put the diagram? It must be there. Oh, there it is. This diagram shows the steps involved when chemical receptors in the nose detect different scents. Which statement describes the next two steps in the process? So let's see. It's going to be the first one. Nerves pass the signal to the brain where it is processed. Nerves pass the signal to the brain where it is processed. Okay, how do different animals process information at different rates? So let's go down here. Different animals process information at different rates. For example, quick-moving insects and small birds process visual information more rapidly than leatherback turtles, so I would include that example. Insects and birds respond quickly to catch prey or avoid being eaten by predators. Leatherback turtles move slowly and feed on slow-moving jellyfish, so fast visual processing. So what they're saying is if the insects and small birds need that fast visual processing, whereas the leatherback turtles don't need that. Let's see. And then we're going to talk about the human brain. There's 4 lobes to the human brain: the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital. So the 4 lobes of the human brain are right here, and you can write those here. The function of the frontal lobe, the boss, it coordinates planning, organization, behaviors, and emotions. The temporal lobe is associated with hearing, language, and olfactory. That's your nose. The parietal lobe processes sensory information related to taste, temperature, and touch. And then the occipital lobe is involved with the reception of visual stimuli. Okay, so let's go to 105. Okay, example of sensory inputs stored in the brain. Sensory inputs can result in an immediate response, and they can also be stored in the brain for future. For example, so here's an example. An animal might perform an immediate behavior of spitting out bad tasting prey. The animal might also store that information as a memory and avoid the prey when they meet again. So they tried it once, it was awful, they're going to store that in their memory. Hey, I don't like that. Okay. Behavior. So here's a definition of behavior: the set of actions taken by an organism in response to stimuli. Innate behaviors. Example. Okay. So innate behaviors are animal behaviors that do not require learning or experience. Behaviors that do not require learning and experience are called innate behaviors. An example of an innate behavior is how a newborn whale knows how to swim as soon as they're born. And then a learned behavior, the definition of a learned behavior, these behaviors depend on memory. So it comes from observing the actions of other animals, memories, and experiences. That's a learned behavior. Okay, so here's some quick checks. The diagram shows several parts of the human eye. Which statement best describes how sensory receptors in the eye gather information to be processed by the brain? It's going to be the last one. Cells in the retina detect light and produce nerve signals sent to the brain through the optic nerve. And then scientists conducted an experiment to show whether the ability to see an object affects a person's idea of the mass of the object. They use the following procedure, and it gives you the procedure. The table shows the results. Compare how the response to the sensory information was processed differently by the brain of the blindfolded participants and the non-blindfolded participants. So let's take a look. The large box was more massive, the smaller box was more massive, both boxes had the same mass. So if they were not blindfolded, if they could see, then they assumed the larger box was more massive. And then if they were blindfolded, they assumed they both had the same mass. So without the sense of sight, they didn't have the predetermination of which box would be heavier or not. With the sense of sight, they assumed the larger box was heavier. Example of learned behavior. Birds learn their songs by listening to other individuals. So birds learning songs of their species. And then we have another quick check. Beth has a 1-day-old baby daughter. When Beth puts her finger on the baby's hand, the baby grasps her finger. Which statement best describes why the baby grasps Beth's finger? And it's A. The baby's reflex to grab is an innate behavior. It's not learned. She didn't have to watch her mom grab things. What happens during hibernation? Let's go this way. 106. Hibernation is a behavior that allows animals to survive in their habitats through the winter months. Animals that hibernate store body fat when food is plentiful. So I would just write for what happens during hibernation that it's a behavior that allows animals to survive in their habitats during the winter months when food may be scarce. And then we go down, we'll see the definition of memory. Information can be stored in the brain as memory. What is the difference between visual memory and odor memory? Odor memory can help animals identify their infants and family members. Visual memory can help them remember the locations of food sources and migration routes. Odor memory can help animals identify their infants and family members. Visual memory can help them remember locations of food sources or migration routes. How does animal memory help an animal to survive? Memory allows an animal to respond to the environment more efficiently. They can remember the location of food and spend more time eating. So it allows them to just move through the environment more efficiently if they remember that's where the food is, that's where the water is, that's where the predator is, I don't want to go there. Quick checks. Which of the following is an example of how the need to maintain homeostasis can cause an organism to change its behavior? And it's A, a bear hibernates during the winter. And then a student visits a farm and makes these notes in her journal. Explain the danger, how the danger was processed by the chick's brain on day 1, and then how events of day 1 affected the chick's behavior on day 2. So on day 1, a chick wanders out into an open field away from its mother and the chicken coop. A hawk swoops towards the chick. The chick sees the hawk and runs quickly to the safety of the chicken coop. On day 2, the chicken coop door is open and the chick says, I'm not going anywhere. So when the chick had the interaction with the hawk on the first day, it learned that if it goes away from its mom and away from the coop, then it could be in danger. And so the second day, it stayed close to mom and close to the coop. Okay, another quick check. A group of students is investigating memory. The students performed an experiment in which they showed letters on a screen to participants and afterward asked the participants to recall the letters they saw. Next, they showed the participant the letters and at the same time pronounced the sound of the letter. Which prediction and explanation are most likely correct? It's going to be C. The participants would remember more letters while hearing the letter pronounced because information is received in more than one way. Okay, and then I think this is the last of it. Migration and why do animals migrate? 109. So this is 107, 108. This is 109. Okay. So migration is a seasonal movement from one place to another. Migration is a seasonal movement from one place to another. Migration is often related to food or reproductive needs. So why do they migrate? Because of food and reproductive needs. Let me know if you have any questions.